The Witch Herself by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor, Chapter 1. The crow was dead, but the cat was alive, and there was still something very wrong. Only the night before, Lynn had gone outdoors to get another log for the fire, and had seen Mrs. Tuggle standing in the street out front. She had been wrapped in a heavy brown coat, almost hiding her face. As Lynn had watched from the shadows, the old woman had pointed one finger at the Morley house, chanted something that Lynn could not understand, and then hurried on up Water Street to her house at the top. Lynn sat on the window seat in the music room, her chin on her knees, hugging her legs for warmth. The snow outside had settled into a hard, icy crust, and cold air seeped through the cracks around the bay windows. She wiped a clear spot on the frosty glass, but it soon clouded over again. That was the way it was with evidence. Whenever she and Marjorie Beasley thought they had proof of Mrs. Tuggle's witchcraft, it never seemed clear enough to convince anybody else. That the old woman was eccentric, everybody agreed. There were even rumors that her younger brother, who had supposedly drowned over 40 years ago and was buried in the old cemetery, had not died accidentally at all. But beyond that, no one paid much attention to her. She remained a mystery, a conversation piece, a little lady who had come over from England, heaven knew when, and kept to herself in the house on the hill. Of course, the Morleys would not be involved at all if Mother hadn't gone looking for a studio last year where she could write. She had been looking for a barn, actually, or a loft, the usual sort of place where authors chose to work, when her eyes fell on Mrs. Tuggle's old hen house. Instantly, she had seen the nesting boxes along one wall filled with envelopes and paper and carbon sets, and in a few months she had cleaned it out and redecorated it with the help of the old woman herself. Outside, a small figure in a blue hooded coat was coming slowly down the icy hill, and Lynn recognized the skinny legs of Marjorie Beasley, better known as Mouse. Her piano lesson was undoubtedly over, and she was stopping by, as she always did on Mondays, to talk an hour or so before dinner. Lynn couldn't help but smile as she watched Marjorie's feet skid out from under her on the icy path, sending her sprawling on the sidewalk and her music flying. But soon she was making her way across the street to the Morley house and staring up the steep steps that led to the front porch. Lynn got up and waited for her at the front door. "You saw me fall, I'll bet," Marjorie said, taking off her huge owl-like glasses and wiping them on the sleeve of her coat. Lynn smiled again. "I couldn't help laughing, Mouse. You looked as though you were trying out for the Olympics or something. I mean, your feet were going in all directions." Marjorie laughed too. "I'm starved," she said, which is what she always said when she came in. It didn't matter if she had just eaten Thanksgiving dinner. Mouse was always hungry, and she never seemed to gain an ounce. Mrs. Morley was standing at the back door when the girls came into the kitchen. Her arms were folded across her chest, and she stared out over the yard and the garden, the fields that led down to Cowden's Creek. "I hate January," Mrs. Morley said, as if to herself. Lynn and Mouse stood motionless in the doorway. "Mother?" Lynn said, and waited. Mrs. Morley turned around, stared at the girls for a moment, as though she hardly recognized them, and suddenly was herself again. "I didn't hear you come in, Marjorie," she said. "Gracious, it's cold out there, isn't it? The streets positively shine, they're so slippery. Want some lemon bread? I've just baked a batch. It's best when it's hot." Mother looked like a giant herself, Lynn thought, with her hair tied back by a scarf, her sweater pulled up on her arms, and old loafers showing beneath her plaid socks. What's more, she was pretty, and Judith and Stevie, with their wide-spaced eyes, resembled her. Lynn resembled her father. Their faces were long, the eyes close together. When Lynn looked in the mirror, she seemed to see a young colt instead of a girl, and she was not particularly pleased with the resemblance. "Thanks," Marjorie said, as Mrs. Morley cut 2 thick slices of bread and spread them with cream cheese. "Smells delicious." They took their bread back to the music room and curled up on the window seat. "I've decided what I want to be," Mouse said, taking a big bite and catching the crumbs with her other hand. It was an obsession with Marjorie, ever since her parents had separated a few months before and her mother had gone to live in Ohio. Mouse craved to know what career suited her best. It was another way of expressing her fears about what would become of her, Lynn decided, and Lynn was very good at figuring people out. What she wanted to be was a psychiatrist, and Mouse used to say that all she could think of becoming herself was Lynn's first patient. But now she had something else in mind. "What do you want to be?" Lynn asked. She was prepared for anything where Marjorie Beasley was concerned. "A hypnotist." "A what? Where did you get that idea?" Mouse grinned, and the grin made her look very unlike a hypnotist. Marjorie had always looked like a mouse, with her huge eyes and her stubby nose and the short dark hair that framed her face. "From a book," said Marjorie. "Daddy gave it to me. He got it in a box he picked up at an auction. I am on chapter 2 already, and when I finish, I'm going to practice on you." "That's what friends are for, I guess," Lynn said gamely. "But you know, Mouse, it could be dangerous." "I won't do anything drastic," Marjorie promised. "How will you make a career of it? Go on stage?" "No, I thought maybe I'd work in a dentist's office and hypnotize people who were afraid of the drill. Or maybe I could work with you and hypnotize patients so they could remember what happened to them when they were small." "Hypnotism can help you remember things?" "Sure. If you had a previous life, Mouse, you could find that out too." "A previous life? Cripes, Lynn. You mean like maybe you were Pocahontas or somebody?" "Something like that. I suppose you could. Who do you think you were?" "I don't know that I was ever anybody else. I'm just curious, that's all." They sat a while without talking. Mouse picked up the last crumb of the lemon bread, which had fallen down on the window seat, and stared out over the frozen snow. "It's happening again, Lynn," she said at last. "I can feel it." "What is?" Lynn asked, but she already knew. "Mrs. Tuggle's up to something, I can just tell." Like a wisp of cold air, a tingle of fear ran the length of Lynn's body and then ebbed away, leaving her shivering. She had felt it too. It was just that it became official when Mouse said it. "What makes you think so?" she asked finally. "I passed Mrs. Tuggle on the street when I was coming back from my piano lesson." It was the way she looked at me, Lynn. I can't describe it. Her eyes, something about her eyes. She seemed so confident, so sure of herself. And then she called me by a name I never heard before. At first, I thought she was going crazy, that she had me mixed up with somebody else. But I'm sure that's not it. There's a reason she talks sometimes in that language no one can understand. "I feel it too," Lynn confessed, and told Mouse about seeing the old woman standing in the street the night before. "What should we do, Mouse? What in the world should we do?" "I don't think we can do anything until we know exactly what she's up to. We'll just have to wait." "That's the hardest of all." After Marjorie had gone home, Lynn wondered about it again. She was uneasy, but she did not know why. Restless without a reason. Every day the family lived its usual routine. Father to work at the courthouse, Mother to her studio, Judith to junior high, Lynn to 6th grade, and Stevie to kindergarten. And yet something was not as it should be, and the something escaped her. That night at the dinner table, the fear or the dread, or whatever it was, seemed a little closer, a little more real, when Mother said suddenly, almost casually, "I'm going to move my studio into one of Mrs. Tuggle's upstairs rooms till spring. The hen house is just too drafty, and my fingers are always cold in spite of the stove." Mr. Morley shrugged and went on eating his soup. Judith seemed not even to have heard, and Stevie was forming a circle of peas around the edge of his plate. "Do you think that's a good idea, Mother?" Lynn asked finally. "If it will keep me from freezing, I think it's a marvelous idea," Mrs. Morley replied. "Pass the butter," said Judith. If she were right about Mrs. Tuggle, Lynn thought, and the old woman was a witch who was trying to lure people into her coven, there had to be a reason why she was doing it now. Why would she live peacefully in this little Indiana town for 50 years and then suddenly begin trying to form a coven? The reason for one witch to try to create others was simple. The more witches there were in a coven, the greater the cone of power. That was what she and Mouse had learned from the book Spells and Potions, before the cat destroyed it. But why did Mrs. Tuggle want more power at this particular time? Lynn believed it had something to do with the cemetery, but she had no proof. There were actually 2 cemeteries in the town, an old one and a new one. Many people felt that the old one, which had long been neglected, should be redeveloped and turned into something else, even high-rise apartment buildings, and that the graves should be moved to the new cemetery. In checking death certificates of those who were supposed to be buried there, however, the clerk at the courthouse could find no death certificate at all from Mrs. Tuggle's brother, nor was there, upon further investigation, any record in the county newspaper of a young man drowning 40 years ago. Lynn felt that there was a reason why Mrs. Tuggle did not want her brother's grave disturbed, a reason why the old woman felt she needed all the power she could get to force the city to leave the ancient cemetery alone. Mouse said that if the coffin were ever dug up and opened, it would probably be empty. She believed that 40 years ago Mrs. Tuggle had bodily transformed her young brother into her demon cat, a huge brown-black beast that roamed the neighborhood at night and seemed almost human in its responses. And indeed, the cat wore a chain about its neck with a spider medallion, the same sort of medallion that Mrs. Tuggle's brother wore in a photograph that Lynn and Mouse had seen once in the old woman's living room. But because they had no proof, there was nothing they could do. Later in the week, Marjorie finished reading the book on hypnotism and wanted to try her ability on someone. "How about Stevie?" Lynn offered, not wanting to volunteer herself just yet. At least, this way she could observe what was happening and stop Mouse if it seemed to be getting out of hand. "Hey, Stevie," Lynn said as her small brother ambled by the living room where they were sitting. "How would you like to be the subject of an experiment Mouse is doing?" "Okay," said Stevie at once, ready for any diversion. His trust caused a slight pang in Lynn's conscience. "What do I have to do?" "Just sit in the chair, Stevie," Mouse instructed, "and make yourself as comfortable as you can. That's it. Lean back and let your legs go limp. Now you've got to pay attention to me, Stevie. Listen to what I say and think about staying comfortable." Stevie sat motionless, grinning. Mouse chose a spot of sunlight on the wall and asked him to look at it. "Don't take your eyes off that spot," she instructed. "You are very, very tired now. You want to go to sleep." "I am not," Stevie said indignantly, fearing it was all a nap trap. "I'm not sleepy at all." "I know, but we're just pretending," Mouse said hastily. "Just pretend you're very tired, Stevie, and that you want to go to sleep. Your legs feel very heavy, your feet are heavy." For 5 minutes, Stevie sat very still, and his eyelids began to droop just a little. At that moment, Lynn sneezed. Stevie's eyes popped open, and Mouse had to start over again. "Your feet are heavy, Stevie. Your arms are very limp. Your eyes are very, very tired. You are looking at the spot of sunlight on the wall and feeling very sleepy." This time, when his eyes began to droop, Mouse said, "Now you are going to relax your right arm, Stevie. Don't try to move it. Just let it do whatever it wants, and it will rise up in the air. Your right arm will bend at the elbow and rise." And slowly, as Lynn watched, Stevie's right arm, bent at the elbow, rose up in the air and stayed there, as if held by some invisible string. The fingers of the hand hung limp, and Stevie's half-closed eyes remained on the spot of sunlight ahead of him. Mouse was suddenly terror-stricken at her own power. Quickly, she clapped her hands and said, "Okay, Stevie, that's it. Wake up. You're awake now, Stevie, wide awake." Stevie's arm went down and he blinked a few times. He looked at Mouse. "When are we going to start, Mouse?" he asked. "It's all over, Stevie," said Lynn. "Nothing even happened," he protested. "Did you feel your arm rise up?" He shook his head, then nodded. He couldn't seem to remember. Lynn and Mouse stared at each other. It worked. Mouse could do it. "This is a dumb game," said Stevie, sliding off the chair and going out to the kitchen for some cookies. "Try me," said Lynn, but Mouse shook her head. "I'm going to read the book again so I don't make any mistakes," she said. "Wouldn't it be awful, Lynn, if I got somebody to sleep and couldn't wake them up again?" The following day, however, Mouse came over and said she was ready to try. They went up to Lynn's bedroom, the whole third floor of the Morley house, which she shared with Judith, divided in the middle by a heavy curtain. Lynn lay down on her bed. This time, Marjorie had brought a spoon, a shiny silver spoon that she turned from side to side in her hand as she stood at the foot of Lynn's bed. "Concentrate on the spoon, Lynn, and just let yourself go. Make yourself as comfortable as possible." Lynn settled her head on the pillow, wiggled her feet a few times, and lay with her arms outstretched, palms turned upwards, shifting here and there until every inch of her body was relaxed. The spoon in Marjorie's hand was slowly turning this way and that in the dim light of the winter afternoon, the silver alternately gleaming and growing dark again as it twisted one way and then another. "You are sleepy, very sleepy," Mouse intoned, and Lynn began to giggle. Mouse stopped. "Listen, Lynn, you have to take it seriously or it won't work." Lynn tried again. "Okay, I'm ready now." Again, the spoon went up, and Lynn focused on it intently. Back and forth it twisted. "Your feet are very heavy, Lynn. You can feel your heels sinking down in the bed. Your eyes are tired. Your arms are relaxed. You can barely move them. Your fingers are limp now, and your eyes are beginning to close. You are sleepy, very sleepy." At first, Lynn thought it would never work. She was much too conscious of Mouse at the foot of her bed, looking far too serious and therefore rather silly. The ridiculous spoon went round and round, those dumb words, but as the words were repeated again and again, the soft monotony of sounds bored her, and her mind began to wander. She felt as though she were floating away from the bed, from the room, from Marjorie. "You are very tired, very sleepy, and you want to rest," came Mouse's voice again and again. Lynn was floating now, up beyond the ceiling and out over the backyard, hovering over Cowden's Creek. From her position above the sycamore trees, she could see Mrs. Tuggle's house at the top of the hill, and the Beasley home at the bottom, with her own in between. She could see the school where she and Mouse went every day, and the playground equipment, and the business district, and the library, and Mr. Beasley's bookstore. Then she saw the old cemetery with the iron gates that hung on one hinge, and the gravestone of the two angels where Mrs. Tuggle's brother was buried. Then she noticed the fog settling in, and it was difficult to see any more. And suddenly someone was slapping her face, and she heard Mouse saying, "Lynn, wake up, it's over, Lynn. You are wide awake now." She opened her eyes. "Good grief, Mouse, we just got started." She sat up on one elbow. Marjorie's face looked very strange. "What's the matter? What happened?" "I was afraid you wouldn't wake up." "How long was I out?" "Just a few minutes." "Then why did you try to wake me?" "I got scared." "Why? Something you said." "What? Tell me, Mouse." "Well, I was going to take you back when you were 5, just for practice," Marjorie said, "but I never got that far." "Why not?" "I did everything the book said. I asked if you were comfortable, and you said yes. I asked if you wanted to go on a little trip with me, and you said yes. I asked how old you were now, and you said 11. Then I asked you what your name was, and you said Dorola." "I said what?" "Dorola." "Who's she? That's what I want to know." "Well, Mouse, why didn't you try to find out? Why did you bring me out of it?" "I tried to find out, Lynn. I said, 'Who is Dorola?' And you said, 'My name is Dorola.' That's when I got scared and woke you up." Lynn looked at Mouse. What did it mean? Where had the name come from? She was sure she had never heard it before in her life. Mrs. Morley was now working on the 3rd draft of her manuscript about witches. She had begun the book early last summer, rewritten it during the fall, and was now doing the 3rd and final revision. Ordinarily, 3rd drafts were happy occasions. The writing usually went rapidly and well, and Mrs. Morley was in a good mood. But this 3rd draft was different. The final chapters were not going well at all. Mother seemed nervous and edgy. Sometimes she spoke sharply for no apparent reason. Mr. Morley and Judith noticed it too. "You haven't heard a word I said." Father put down his newspaper and looked across the room at Mother. She was curled up in her big green chair near the fireplace, with her writing board in her lap. In the bookcase nearby were all 7 of her published books. By Sylvia Jackson Morley, each book said on the cover, below the title. And each was an adventure story taking place on the ocean or in the mountains, or out in the desert somewhere. Not until now had she ever written a book about witches. Mrs. Morley looked up. "I read you a whole story from the paper and you weren't even listening," Father said again. "I'm sorry, Dick. I guess I was distracted." Judith was sitting at the dining room table, restringing a strand of beads. Lynn, across from her, was doing her math homework. "You've been distracted a lot lately, Mom," Judith said. "Every time I talk to you, you seem a million miles away." "It's this darn manuscript," Mother said, shoving it away from her. "I don't know what possessed me to write a book about witches. It's been nothing but trouble. I've been so bothered with it, I haven't even had time to move into Mrs. Tuggle's." "Possession, that's what it is," Father quipped. "Write about witches and they fly out of the pages and take over." Lynn kept her eyes on her homework, but she was listening to every word. It was important, however, not to show it. Her suspicions about Mrs. Tuggle had caused one big argument between her parents already, and she didn't want to risk another, not until she had absolute proof. Proof she could hold in the palm of her hand, proof nobody could dispute. Would she bring the subject up again? But that didn't mean that she and Mouse weren't working on it. "I'm paying full attention now," Mother was saying to Father, back in the living room. "What were you reading to me?" "It's a long story about the cemetery. The committee investigating land use is supposed to come up with a recommendation by March 31st about whether or not to close the old cemetery. Then the zoning commission will decide what to do about the land." Mother drew her knees up and locked her hands around them. I certainly don't want to see a high-rise built back there, Dick, the way some of the businessmen are proposing. I would hate to look out our back door across the garden and the meadow and see tall buildings on the hill across the creek. Well, we'll see what happens. Lots of groups are making suggestions. Some want a high-rise, some want a shopping center, some want to just keep the cemetery. Mrs. Tuggle, in fact, turned in a petition yesterday with 50 signatures on it asking for just that. She did? I've never known her to get involved in local politics. But if it was a choice between those old fallen tombstones and a high-rise apartment house, I'd prefer the tombstones too. The following afternoon, when school was out, Lynn and Mouse, bundled in coats and caps and scarves, paid a visit to the old cemetery themselves. In spring, summer, and fall, it was their favorite talking place. Under the huge oak tree at the top of the hill, Lynn would sit down on the gravestone of Mrs. Elfreda Lewis, which had fallen down in front of the tombstone of Mr. Lewis, making a perfect high-backed chair. Mouse always sat across from her on the grave marked C.L. Pritchard, the grave of Mrs. Tuggle's brother, where 2 marble angels held a scroll between them. Mouse sat, in fact, on the scroll and draped her arms affectionately around the angels' necks. If they move the cemetery, I'm going to miss our talking place, Mouse said. I hope Mrs. Tuggle's petition wins out. But there's got to be something behind what she's doing, Lynn said. All these years she's kept to herself, and suddenly she's been standing outside the supermarket getting signatures on a petition. She must have some pretty strong feelings about it. Of course she doesn't want them to dig up her brother's grave, for fear the coffin might open accidentally and someone would see that there was no body in it at all, Mouse said. Maybe there isn't even a coffin, but she'll need more than 50 signatures, even if most people don't care one way or another. Daddy does, though. He says that if they build a high-rise back there, we'll have all sorts of traffic problems, and people will trample the meadow and throw trash in Cowden's Creek. But lots of people want that high-rise. Lynn leaned forward, resting her arms on her knees as she sat cross-legged on the tombstone, and Mrs. Tuggle needs help to keep it from happening. Witchcraft, that's what she needs. Listen, Mouse, I want you to try very, very hard to remember that book of spells and potions. You told me once it said that young boys and girls in their teens make the best warlocks and witches because they're so suggestible. But did it say anything about adults? If a witch met up with a woman whose imagination ran away from her, is it possible that the witch might try to get into her get her into her coven? Sure, Mouse said. The book said that a person of any age can become a witch under the right circumstances. Lynn nodded as if to herself. Mouse, did you know that Mother is moving her studio into Mrs. Tuggle's house till spring? Lynn, don't let her do that. How am I supposed to stop her? Could you stop your mother when she moved to Ohio? When parents get an idea to do something, they just do it, that's all. But how do you suppose it would help if Mother became a witch? What could Mrs. Tuggle and Mother do together to stop the city from moving the graves? A lot of things. Accidents. A bulldozer could tip over. The workmen could get sick. The plans could get lost. All kinds of things could keep going on till the city just gave up. Trying. Mrs. Tuggle could do it, but she'd need as much power as she could get. For a long time, Lynn sat there on the cold tombstone slab. Finally, she said, I wish I could talk to my father about all this. Really talk to him. I wish just for once he'd believe me. It may not be long before he has to believe you, Lynn. If we're right and Mrs. Tuggle gets to your mother, then your father will see for himself. And that is the end of chapter 1.